Thank you, Ira and Derek, for coming, and thank you, Skynet, for the intro. So we've got a lot to cover in a short time frame. I think the introductions speak greatly about the experience you guys both bring and the viewpoint you have on this great industry that we all work in. I think I want to start with getting a sense from each of you where we are in the gaming industry. What's the state of the industry? What historical gaming patterns and developments have stuck, what has faded, and some of where you see things are going at the moment. And we'll talk about future projections maybe later on. But Ira, maybe starting with you, since you are now part of a very exciting gaming studio at the largest streaming company in the world and really a dominant force in entertainment in Hollywood.
So I started in gaming. Well, I started in gaming. Who here played Atari with the joystick and the button? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Gaming it up. So I started personally with early stages with Pong on the computer, and then with Atari and the Commodore with my brothers. And my first job in gaming was at PlayStation. So thinking about where we came from all the way back in the day of console gaming, then I went to free-to-play games and mobile games and saw that whole era of moving from web games to mobile, and then went to Web3 gaming. So kind of seeing the spectrum of all the different areas in gaming from inside of developers and as well representing platforms. And now at Netflix, it's actually very interesting because we're taking a lot of the learnings from across the whole genre of gamings and thinking really hard about what engages people. So when you ask the question, which is an excellent question, sort of where are we right now? I think that the industry is in an interesting place. We all see the terrible news of game studios cutting and developers shutting down, some absorption of smaller players, a lot of really talented people out in the industry right now looking for work, and so much opportunity at the same time. And what I mean by the opportunity, I think more than ever before, people, especially thinking about the younger generation, people are coming in native to phones, native to TVs that are smart, native to computers that interact with all of your other devices. There is an opportunity here where we can bring all of these engaging experiences and fold them together because the technology is finally powerful enough to enable that. So just as a kind of a macro level, I think the opportunity we have in the game industry is huge. And then the next question is, how do you rise above the noise? Because there's so much content. I mean, I work at Netflix, my God, you can live there. Like staring at Netflix for 24 hours a day and still not absorb everything. But I don't think that's what any of us are looking for. No one really wants to see the kids just sitting there addicted to a game, 24/7 blindly swiping. I think what we're all looking for is a way to bring people together. I think the opportunity for the games industry is to think very much about how the impact is in this very divided world. We're global and yet we're so divided and we're so siloed. I feel like a lot of the opportunity right now where we are is some of the top developers, some of the top platforms are thinking more and more about interconnectivity. They're thinking about community building. They're thinking about how to reach engaged audiences, not just through clickbait, but rather address what people actually want and engage them in a productive way. So that's broad brushstrokes, but I see there's a lot of opportunity, even though right now the industry might be in a challenging place, it seems like from the outside, but from within there's incredible amounts of passion, so I'm optimistic.
And to drill down, maybe a little more specific to your employer, your company, your gaming platform is effectively a subscription gaming platform, part of a broader subscription package. Obviously, it's an included feature. Is subscription gaming something that you're seeing a trend, kind of direction that companies will be going in? You're obviously in it because that's the business model of Netflix. There have been attempts by some other companies on a standalone basis to have subscription gaming. Some have failed, some have been moderately successful. But tell us about kind of that model and how that works for a Netflix user.
That's a great question. One of the benefits of Netflix is, frankly, we have 600 million, plus or minus a few hundred million, viewers that are dedicated to the space. And if they engage in content on Netflix, they don't have to pay anything more. it's available to them. So that's one of the things that we have. We already have an engaged audience. We don't have to build that. I'll say the challenging thing about gamers, though, because there's a Netflix subscription base, and part of the theory and the strategy behind why Netflix got into games 3 years ago is because they realized that impact of people wanting to be entertained, the mission of Netflix being entertain the world, the impact that can be made by moving that entertainment into an interactive way, it's immense. So the mission of Netflix is really entertain our subscribers, give them something engaging, let them take Bridgerton or Stranger Things and continue to live that world even after the series is done. Others, I think, have tried it, and I don't think it necessarily works on all platforms, with no critique as to specific strategies. But I think that gamers as an industry, as anyone who works in gaming knows, gamers are really fickle. There's no loyalty. You know, when they find the one game, like if you're a World of Warcraft or League of Legends, you will stay there forever. But it's not a company that you're loyal to. It's your community. It's that game. It's that IP, whatever that might be. But they don't really care who delivers it. And so I think that's where it's harder for some companies to really get into the game space if they don't have, if their mission is to make money. You know, there's so much money. People always talk about so much money in the game space. Let's get a piece of it. If the mission is to make the money, I think it's going to be challenging to succeed because gamers don't look for, oh, you make great T-shirts and whatever else, and therefore you'll make good games. They are a cynical group.
Yep.
And so it's important to really know what the gamers want.
And we'll explore that because it's a very good point about the fickle nature of gamers and convincing them that Netflix knows how to make games that they're going to want to play. And so, Derek, you work at the largest talent agency in the world. You have the privilege of kind of really having a bird's eye view of the gaming industry in a lot of ways because your clients are everything from game developers to Post Malone and others who are interested or active in the gaming industry. What are you seeing at the moment? I mean, gaming is still comparable to traditional media and entertainment, massive. $200 billion a year industry and still growing. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of money, but there's also some challenge and some interesting opportunity.
Yeah, and I think, not to reiterate everything that you said, but if you look at the long arc of sort of the growth of video games, it's really impressive, right? If you look at where we were in 2008 with about a decade ago, about 1 billion users overall globally, and now we're over 3 billion. And that's tremendous growth over the last decade. And it's driven and attached to technology and technological advancements. We'll talk about that in AI. But those technological advancements are very closely related to games, game delivery, game consumption, game creation. And so when you hand people tools like Unity and Unreal that they didn't have access to before, all of a sudden you create an entirely new creator base. So it's not about, 20 years ago, you had to have, a very accomplished coder to create an engine. You had to have a team, and then you had to go to retail, which means you had to have a publisher that printed discs, and then talk to Target and Walmart, and there are all these things that got between the artist and their audience. And now all those things have sort of been wiped away. We have all these digital platforms. We have this way for people to create games relatively easily. It's dramatically changed what has happened and who is a creator in the space for the benefit, and I think that's going to continue to sort of accelerate over the next decade. But it's also really contributed to the globalization and growth of the game industry through mobile phones. Obviously, that's had an incredible impact, and smartphones had an incredible impact, as well as what you talked about, like socializing and games being sort of like part social network and part game. And recent studies have shown that over 50% of gamers want to play with other gamers. They want to play together. And I think if you poke down younger generations, that number goes up. And so and especially post-COVID, you have generations that that's how they interacted with each other for 2 years, and that has stuck with them. That habit has stuck with them. And it's impacted, obviously, not just sort of the game industry and the growth of the game industry, but you've seen it have an impact on culture and entertainment. Netflix is in games. You have Disney investing $1.5 billion into Epic because they realize like all this IP that they've spent billions of dollars on needs to be out there in the world differently. You can't just have a movie every 2 years and expect that IP to continue to be relevant to a younger audience. You need to be in front of that audience on the platforms where they reside, where their friends reside. And you have video games sort of being an incredible sort of fountain of IP for film and television. We've seen Mario succeed. We've seen The Last of Us and Fallout come out, succeed, be very critically acclaimed. So now the entire world is sort of taking notice of video games as sort of a huge cultural phenomenon. And I think, again, if you just look at the consumption patterns of younger generations, that's going to continue to accelerate. And games are going to continue to become more and more essential part of entertainment.
There have been a few cycles of game to movie and movie to game that have not been as
I have experienced most of those, except for, I mean, as a consumer, I experienced the original Mario movie. But yeah, I was at.
Sorry about that.
No, it's wonderful. Dennis Hopper, are you kidding? I was at William Morris when we saw the first Halo script. Yep. This was about 18 years ago, 17 years ago, and all the sort of starts and stops trying to get games to film, because I think there was a desire, but there wasn't an understanding.
Yep.
There was a fundamental disconnect between the individuals that were excited about bringing this to film and the audience. And
Yep.
now those are the same people. And so we work with Jonah Nolan, who did Fallout. And if you talk to him, he also did the Batman movies. You talk to him, and he is a sort of dyed-in-the-wool gamer. He gets all these games, and he wants to bring them to a larger audience, right? And now you see that class of creator being interested in game and game IP.
So
one point that, Derek, that you said that I love, the disconnect between the person making the creation and the audience. And I find that that's so common, and I'm sure for all the lawyers who've represented folks that are like just hell-bent on bringing this thing, this creation to light because they just believe in it. And they're like, if I build it, they will come. But I think that what you said was exactly right. You can't build with what you think is going to be great. You have to keep the audience in mind. What exactly, who's going to be watching, who's going to be engaging, what community are you reaching? That has to be the driving force. It's hard for creation, but that's the most essential thing. You cannot just build what your passion project is. It must be something that the audience wants.
not every cornfield should be a baseball diamond, is what you're saying.
No, as it turns out.
So let's talk about one of the trends, current hot trends, is playing on these little guys right here, right, the devices. And that has been massive of late, particularly for games like Monopoly Go and some of these other kind of mobile, really strictly mobile-based games. What are you seeing there? Either one of you, does Netflix have a mobile-based
I'm so glad
experience
you asked, Tom.
Yeah.
We do, in fact, have mobile games. Actually, the way that the evolution of Netflix games happened was that we started with mobile, because mobile people meet people where they are, bring things to the audience where they already are. And so in mobile, you can actually get a third-party developer and have them bring the game onto your platform in shorter time. And as we all know, development cycles of a native game is anywhere between 18 to 36 months. And that said, you need to have the IP. If it's a license, you need to make your own native IP, whatever that might be. But what I will say is an interesting observation and a strategy bet by Netflix was cloud gaming. And so if any of you guys happen to have, who here has a Netflix subscription? Just curious. Okay. So if any of you guys decide to scroll down your lines, I know, and just find the cloud games, there are cloud games currently there. And what's interesting is we're actually making the mobile phone act as a controller, which opens up an entire world of potential when you're thinking you're not stuck with buttons or a joystick or anything. You're actually, the world is your oyster on your phone. And what I thought was interesting is some of the first CI tests on this and using a phone as a controller for the larger screen. Some of the friction was that people were like, I can't feel a button, And then I'm watching my kids play and they did not look down once. it's so native to them to know where things are based on the fact that it's like a flat screen with no buttons. But this is the generation that grew up in pandemic. This is the generation that will be the next audience that will be really digging in and the next subscribers. So anyway, I've kind of twisted the question to something kind of random, but it just dawned on me what you're saying about the phone being such an easy thing. We're digging into that, and I find it super fun. Like, imagine if your phone can tell you something that the other players can't hear. All the things that you can do because the technology is now there. So.
Yep.
Yeah, the phones are just ubiquitous. iPads, phones, playing on glass. Similar, like my kids will play Minecraft on their iPad, and the way they can navigate, it's my. And then they hand it to me, and I just look like an oaf. But mobile is obviously incredibly important. It's why there's so much global penetration, and it's why there's going to continue to be so much global penetration. And generationally, I think the mobile phone, when I look at my kids and sort of the cohort around my kids, they feel very mobile native. Consoles are a step away from them, like PCs a couple steps away from them. So I think that if you extrapolate that out, they're going to be very comfortable continuing to play games on their phones. The challenge in the mobile market now is really sort of monetization and sort of breaking through. Right now, sort of the way the app stores are constructed from an algorithm standpoint, it's very tough to get in that top 20. And if you can't break through to that top 20, then you'll sort of languish.
And then another key trend is around in open world games, UGC, right? And that's been a massive growth area. Roblox was kind of built for UGC, but others who really didn't design the games in that fashion have now opened up. You've seen Fortnite now has UGC. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the UGC area, and what are the opportunities for developers?
Yeah, this is sort of that new creator class, right? It's you're lowering the barrier to entry to create really compelling games and interactions. It's also changing fundamentally what games are. If you've experienced like any sort of UGC on Roblox or Minecraft, you'll see a huge diversity of experiences that you would not see on console, you wouldn't see on PC, right? Like a fashion game is blowing up on Roblox right now, and it's a very simple design, but it's incredibly popular, and you just never see anything like that. So it's really diversified the market. It's diversified the types of games that are being made, and it's diversifying the creator class, because a lot of these are created by young kids, young adults, and just a couple of them, and that is their life now, right? That is their job. It's like they're like garage bands that just got discovered, right? And now their life is going to be that. And they can, as the technology becomes easier to use, but also more powerful, the games are going to get slightly more complex and easier to make and quicker. And so I think we're going to see that shape the way that creator class and the cohort also consumes the games, right? Their expectation on consumption, their expectation on how long it takes to get to market, 5 years versus 5 months, and fundamental to all that is the experience itself. It's going to be wildly divergent from what we're familiar with, and there's been obviously a huge amount of stagnation on AAA. You've seen it. You've seen it in the news. You've seen Ubisoft struggle consistently for the last 4 years, just not able to break through, and all the innovation is occurring in these double I, indie, or UGC games.
And so to segue to financing in the space, are you seeing venture or other types of financing look or participate in some of these? Is there real monetization there to create value for an investor?
There is, yeah. It's I'd say more on Roblox than on Fortnite right now, just the way they're constructed and monetization is constructed. But I think the expectation moving forward is that there's going to be a proliferation of these platforms I don't think it's going to be just Roblox. It's going to be just Fortnite. I think we're going to see several others emerge. And if you look at it from the structure of potential roll-up, then it makes sense. You can put a bunch of these together and actually have a very good business.
And one comment as well on investment. I'll also add to that, I totally agree with the UGC, this entire economy being created by this. And in terms of investments and where I see money flowing at this point from external forces, if you tack AI onto anything, it's probably going to get some funding. But I will say for all the companies out there right now, this burgeoning of all of it's almost like clickbait for investors when you talk about this great new AI platform. Cynicism aside, I actually feel like there's an incredible birth of innovation happening right now. A lot of it's already become public, but a lot of it's still being built, which is infrastructure, which is the new Unity, the new Unreal Engine, the new ways that users and small garage band UGC creators can actually bring games to light. I think there's a lot of great innovation in AI that doesn't, no offense to present company, but that doesn't have to do with like robots and things that hit the uncanny valley and might alarm people. It's more how to use and harness the powers of AI to make really interactive engines and communities. So anyway, there's a lot of investment money that's waiting to find the next big thing.
Well, you're helping me pivot to the next topic of AI, but I think before we leave financing, as I don't want to give it, I want to give it full attention. There's certainly been a pullback. I mean, I think in 2021 there was like $12 billion of venture financing coming into all forms of gaming, and I think last year was under
rich times, 2021.
Right. So I mean, it's dropped precipitously. Are you either of you seeing interest coming back in a major way? Is it stagnant? Does it have to have AI in the deck to make sense?
Being someone on the sales side, yeah, we went through about 18 months of sort of dark times when there was pretty considerable pullback. Yep. And I'm not going to say we're back, baby, but like certainly there is renewed interest. And what we're seeing is there's a bunch of strategic investors that were sort of sitting on the sidelines during the pandemic because everything got so overheated, and they were pretty responsible with how they invested. And now that the heat has died down a little bit and investments and valuations are more down to earth, they're aggressively coming into the space and building these long-term plans for not just investing in a studio and then seeing what happens, but having a plan for investing in a studio and then launching that game. Which is a very like responsible way to think about the industry. And we're seeing VCs like step back in and take chances, and certainly that's heated up a little bit again, and it helps to have some level of AI component in it. But I don't think we're going to hit that level of 2020, 2021 anytime soon again.
I like it when investors look to exactly that, the future. When you invest in a team, when you invest in the talent, when you invest in the opportunities and the potential of that team, I think it does go much better than what used to be somewhat in the heyday and some of the venture that I've seen back in mobile games, for example. They buy the game. They buy you for the game, they buy you for the earn-out, they buy you for whatever might happen with that particular game. But can that same company duplicate it? And the answer is, it depends, So I like that there's a thoughtfulness, as with any time there's a ramp back, there is a thoughtfulness when things ramp back up to thinking about the teams that stand the most possibility. It's like a basketball team. Some people compare a really good studio to really understand and have a bead on what people are looking for. And so I do like to see that when talking to folks in the investment side of it, that they're not just wanting this particular game, they want the wealth of knowledge of that team.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And we've seen some pullback even on some of the strategics and the big publishers that you would consistently see in every game deal, especially those from Asia, on some of those
extraneous forces that sort of impacted the overall market have absolutely changed sort of the dynamic. Whether they're from China or you have someone like Microsoft that was driving so much M&A for about 5 years, and now they're sort of like, well, we can't do any more, at least for the foreseeable future, and that changes the dynamic of the market. But again, I think we're in a healthier place overall. And the irony, or maybe it's not too surprising because we've seen this cycle again and again, is a bunch of those studios that were acquired by Embracer, by Microsoft, by others, people are spinning out of that. Like the key creatives, they're like, okay, I did my time here. I'm going to go spin out, and I'm going to go get venture financing for my next thing. And we're going to see that cycle again, and I think it's going to be exciting to see that group of creators come out and give us more content. The one thing I'll say on funding, which continues to be sort of a difficulty, is venture funding that you get through seed and A, and then everyone disappears, right? And now you're like, then you have to go to a strategic, and that's something that hasn't really been solved for yet.
Yep. Okay, AI.
All right.
Amika's listening, so we should be on our best behavior. In your world, Ira, is Netflix?
She's yawning at me.
Watch out.
I told you.
Yeah.
She's moving. She's coming towards me.
Is Netflix, and can you disclose, is Netflix utilizing and its studios AI? And I mean, I think it's ubiquitous in gaming and has been for decades, but is there a real effort to use AI in different aspects of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think I'll speak about it in a more general sense. This is company specific or not. I think it's more interesting to think about like what all the game industry is doing right now. I think there's a big interest, and Netflix is in an interesting place, of course, because the term AI is so often viewed as something that's going to kill jobs, take away rights from content creators, from talent, eliminate their ability to be monetizing their own image and likeness. And this is a huge issue with SAG-AFTRA, as you guys might have followed the news on this. In the game world, of course, you guys probably saw that SAG-AFTRA did pull strike against, declare the strike against some of the larger game developers. So that's one element of it. But I always think it's important that AI isn't just seen as this thing that's going to kill humanity. Sorry, again, present company accepted. But I think that the infrastructure and wow, those eyebrows, it's amazing. But I think that the potential, what I love about games and always have loved about games, the developers, the users, the gamers, we're all the ones that are most willing to dive down deep and fast and first on any new technology, and not just because it'll make it more effective or make you make more money, but just because it's cool. I mean, what more can we do here? Like, what are the things that we can develop to make gaming better, community building more effective, and just give people the content that they want? Like, there's so much to be done there. So I will say that there's just so much potential right now, and there's a lot of great companies building some great tools, and where that all goes will be an interesting one to watch.
And Derek, your clients have been using AI in games for a long time, but maybe subtly or not bringing it to the forefront.
Right.
Is now like every conversation is and we have an AI technology component to what we do, or
a lot of the clients that I work with think about it as a tool set, right? And that tool set can be used in a lot of different ways during production of a game, right? It can be used up front when you're sort of concepting, and that's becoming more ubiquitous, right? Back when I started, when you were going out to pitch a game to a publisher or to an investor, you'd have to create bespoke art. And so you're like, okay, that's a 3-month timeline to create all this bespoke art, and then you take it, and the publisher or investor would be like, I don't like the art. And you're like, terrifying. I just spent so much time on that. Now you can really abbreviate that process. You can abbreviate that process when you're actually making the game as well. And you still have artists on staff, but now they can churn much more concept art quicker. And that's just using sort of the art pipeline. When you look at engineering, when you look at moderation, right? So like when your game is live and you want to make sure people are being nice to each other, now you can use AI to help moderate that and really manage the community. There's a lot of use cases for AI that doesn't include, taking jobs away from people. It actually includes making the experience better for everybody, and also potentially lowering the cost to come to market, lowering the time, to come to market, which is a huge problem now in games. Like a decade and $500 million for a full AAA game. By the time that game comes out, there's been so much change in game design and sort of the audience that game feels less relevant. So I think AI overall will have beneficial effects until, of course, Skynet.
Until Skynet. So I've gotten the 2-minute warning, so I'm going to do 2 quick questions, one for each of you. Data privacy, and more importantly, just the collection of data. I mean, I can only imagine how much data you guys are sitting on at an organization like yours, but generally, and I don't want to put you on the spot about your company, how important is data to everything that companies in this space do? And being a California lawyer, I imagine you're dealing with all the usual legal wranglings of protecting privacy and avoiding liability. And so tell me a little bit about what your experiences are.
Yeah, it's always the thing. Like in gaming in particular, every game company wants to collect so much information about every gamer and their preferences and what they do, and down to the points at which there's friction and how to develop around that, how to build the next content for live services and all of these things. One of the benefits and one of the reliefs I've found starting at Netflix is that we are not a company that monetizes off of data. And actually one thing that Derek just said, which I think is so important, is AI and all the flash and glamour is machine learning, which we've had for a really, really long time. But machine learning, of course, is made better by as much data as you can. Certainly the processing power, thank you, NVIDIA, has increased by magnitudes because of the frameworks around it, but it still ultimately is a matter of processing data. So again, back to why Netflix is nice that we don't focus like Google, and I love Google, I have Google products, but this is how they monetize. They must collect all your information, find a way to monetize on it. For Netflix, happily, most of the uses are internal. It's really a matter of
enhancing the experience and
exactly.
curation.
So the focus on EU and on California and everything else that's happening, of course, remains very, very impactful and very important. But luckily, that is no longer my primary focus, as it was in other industries or other companies, because we as a company don't use that to market out to external parties. We are using that information to make our service better. So the twist on that is helpful. Adding the AI component, of course, will continue to be interesting for data privacy and data collection and management and use. When machine learning models start sharing information or making themselves accessible to other parties, then that's going to be a really great area for lawyers to dive in deeper on.
Great. Derek, esports, I would be remiss if I don't ask, is esports and buying esports teams and clubs, is that dead? Is that a thing of the past? And what is the role of esports in gaming?
Yeah, I think it's challenged and it's challenging, and I think it's just the sort of structural difference between a traditional sports league and an esports league. Like the Riot owning basically everything top down, and the NFL sort of having a football league but not owning football itself creates a very different dynamic. I don't want to call esports dead, because again, you look at sort of generational change, and there's a group of kids that are growing up looking at that as like, a very interesting part of their consumption of game content, right? They want to watch people play it. They want to watch people play it competitively,
right.
And it will have a breakthrough. We thought the breakthrough was 5 years ago. It wasn't. I think it will continue to be an important marketing device. I think it will be important for community. And sometimes self-organized community, but I think it will have the breakthrough. But it's just not necessarily right around the corner. Much like games to film, games to television. Like we're just not there. We thought we were. It's going to take some time, and at some point, someone will do. It will be like F1. It will just break through and be like, oh yeah, of course, it's huge now.
Always optimistic. Appreciate that.
Have to be.
Ira, Derek, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking them as well.
Thank you.